everyone. Welcome to Party Like a Marketer, the podcast dedicated to cannabis marketing, public relations, and authentic storytelling. I'm your host, Lisa Buffo, founder and CEO of the Cannabis Marketing Association. You can connect with me on Instagram at LeeBuff or Twitter at LeeBuff21, and I'm also on LinkedIn. And don't forget to join us at this year's annual Cannabis Marketing Summit, June 7th through 9th in Denver, Colorado, for 2+ days of cannabis marketing speakers, best practices, and networking with the industry's leading brands and retailers and marketing experts over 3 stages in the heart of Civic Center Park. Today's conversation features Sadie Thompson with Proven Media. She is a recent graduate with honors from Northern Arizona University with a passion for media and sports. Sadie maintained a dual major in journalism and strategic communications with an emphasis on advertising, while simultaneously writing and hosting a bi-weekly sports news television broadcast. Her in-depth understanding of journalism and the mechanics of news enable her to connect authentically with reporters, and she brings an innate ability to seek out public relations opportunities for clients. Sadie's skills, her attention to detail, and her positive can-do attitude help build client relationships and exceed expectations. Okay, welcome everybody to today's episode of Party Like a Marketer. Today's guest is Sadie Thompson with Proven Media, and we're going to be talking about cannabis public relations, storytelling, and campaigns today. Sadie, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on, Lisa. I'm so excited to get into our conversation for today.
Of course. So let's get started. Can you first tell our audience a little bit about Sadie? Who are you? How did you get started in the cannabis industry, as well as Proven Media and what Proven Media does and where you're based?
Yes, thank you. So I'm Sadie Thompson. I'm a recent graduate from Northern Arizona University. I have a dual degree in strategic communication and journalism with an emphasis in advertising. I spent most of my college career on the sports journalism side of things. I did sports broadcasting, but it really helped me develop a background for how news worked. With that, I was lucky enough to be introduced to my boss, Kim Prince, at Proven Media my senior year of college. And actually, funny story, I presented my final college advertising capstone project to my boss, and that's actually how I landed my job at Proven Media. So even more so shows how important campaigns are for marketing. But yeah, so Proven Media was established in 2008, and we pivoted strictly to the cannabis industry in 2014. So we have a pretty solid foundation with the cannabis industry, and we service clients in all sectors of the industry, in commercial real estate, brands, entrepreneurs, testing labs, all over the country. And we're a marketing communications and public relations firm. So we do the public relations initiatives for clients, create evergreen campaigns, really find their key messaging. But Proven Media is based in Carefree and in Boston. So we have an East Coast, West Coast play. And we have a team of women. It's a woman-led firm. My boss, Kim Prince, and Nako Catanzaro and Ashley Oak Scott and myself are our team. And yeah, that's just a little bit about Proven Media.
And where's Carefree? That's in Arizona?
Yes, Carefree, Arizona. It's like North Phoenix by Scottsdale.
Is it as carefree as the name sounds? Is it a good place to live?
Yes, we're living carefree and carefree. Yeah. Yeah, I actually grew up here too. So I went to high school. So I've been in this community all my life.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Glad to hear that. And thank you for clarifying for our audience as well.
Yep.
So let's talk a bit about campaigns and public relations. So first I want to know how do you approach them? And if we could first maybe clarify the definition of campaigns. When you say campaigns, are you referencing just public relations, or do you all do marketing and advertising campaigns as well?
So we look at campaigns on every single level. So what we do is we take all of get the key messaging and their foundation of the business, of their target audience, who they're trying to reach, the demographic, the key part, or what makes their product special. We find all of that. And then with that, we create a strategic campaign that these companies can utilize in every single different platform. So with those key messaging, we create press releases. The press releases use the same like brand identity, but they're tailored to like a company, a launch. Say they go into a new market. We'll write a release on that. Say they're a new hire. We'll write a release on that. But we create a marketing mix for businesses. So we want to utilize the same messaging and the same communications through all the different platforms so that each time it touches a consumer or a person interested in the business, they get the same exact message so that it's not lost in the weeds, and it's very specialized and targeted to who they're trying to reach. So to kind of like wrap it all up in a bow, we pull out all of the messaging and then we use all of that messaging throughout the different platforms in a different marketing mix.
I love that. So you're effectively restating one of the things I say on this podcast and with CMA all the time, where to me, marketing and advertising is really the conversation around channels, but effective communications is telling a story. And so when you take the time to put your key messages, understand your brand identity, what's important to the company, and write that out first, then you can decide, what channel or what medium is going to be best to tell that through. But you need to have that story and that foundation first. And it sounds like that's what you do. You get that, write it out, make sure your team and the client is clear, and then sort of decide, what campaign or strategy should we use to get it out there.
Exactly. That is exactly what we do. And that's what we're known for. We're really known for our strategic approaches for how to make these businesses look different to consumers, or to make sure that they stand out to who they want to reach. We also do investor communications. So we're a B2B and B2C firm. So we really like touch all of those different sectors, and each client we create a special marketing mix for them. So everything's very customized to the specific brand or company that we work with.
That makes sense. Okay. And you had mentioned when we were talking earlier about creating evergreen campaigns and evergreen content. Can you talk about that from the PR and marketing side and what that means?
Yeah. So an evergreen campaign is something that we see a lot of companies miss out on, and which is like the huge mishap in marketing, is not having a campaign that businesses can use throughout. So, and what a campaign means, it's like an overarching story, and then through different initiatives, pulling out that that story and positioning it with like a newsworthy tie. So say the campaign was all about say it was like a hemp roll company, and their campaign was about like sustainability, how every time you buy a hemp roll, they plant a tree. So with that, we would, like, for Christmas, it would be like we would tie something in with like a Christmas tree, but you're still getting the understanding and the overarching campaign of that this company is a sustainable company, that when you purchase a product, you are helping the tree landscape in your community. So that there's always like a cause and effect, and campaigns are used so that companies can have that, like for example, a great brand campaign is Nike, Just Do It. They have that overarching campaign of Just Do It, and then they do smaller campaigns within that overarching campaign. But anytime you see Just Do It, that's Nike. But then they have like the Colin Kaepernick thing, like the sacrificing everything for something. It's they have this overarching campaign, and then they have smaller campaigns that that help also with the brand strategy.
So they're reinforcing the messaging. They're taking a campaign or a message, and then they just apply it in these different channels at these different times, depending on what's relevant, in the news, or, what time of year it is, but they're reinforcing the same messaging in ways that's very top of mind and very present based on whatever's going on.
Yes. Yes, and then that also too creates that brand awareness. So anytime that someone sees something that even resembles your brand, they immediately think of your brand. And something too that we talk about a lot with clients is how the cannabis industry is becoming more mainstream, and it eventually will become a commodity. So really positioning these cannabis brands to be more mainstream in lifestyle, so that they're not very they're not too niche to the cannabis industry. They're able to reach a larger demographic, but then we are having that issue with advertising to children and making sure that that is not happening and that we're very compliant. But it is definitely where the industry's going, more mainstream, more lifestyle. So just always keeping that in mind for brands as well.
That makes sense. Yeah, we've seen it. I mean, we're based in Denver and we see a lot of brands do things with, so we're at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains and we see a lot of brands do things with maybe a snowboarding company or the outdoor events that are happening because it is tying that mainstream, lifestyle that's relevant to Colorado and where we are at cannabis, which is also a part of, Colorado and our ecosystem there, but it does bridge that gap. Which I love seeing how different companies do that and in different locations with, whatever it may be for them. Awesome. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the role that PR plays in all of this. Why is it so important? What can cannabis brands learn from PR and how can they approach it?
Yes. So PR is very difficult for a lot of brands because people don't necessarily understand how it works. So to just start off, I kind of want to just talk about how PR works in journalism and especially how it works in the cannabis industry. But essentially, public relations, you want to work with a public relations firm so that you're able to control the narrative of your company. So what PR firms do is, like I said, we get all of those key messaging together. We figure out a campaign. We get all of that foundation built for your business. And then once we have all of that, we're able to start approaching the media. So whenever something is newsworthy or happens in your business, we want to make sure that the news is covering it. So we write a press release and we pitch it out. How we pitch out releases too is we look at it as a local, regional, national pitching effort. So like, say I'm pitching to a newspaper in Arizona, the pitch or the newsworthy tie might be different than Marijuana Venture or a national magazine. I want to utilize more national statistics or some to make that national reporter interested in what I'm saying. But as more PR firms are coming into the space, it's even harder to really make sure that those media placements are set in stone. So that's why we always talk about how it's so important to have like your key messaging and your foundation built of your business before we even start getting into the media coverage, into the PR. Because say we reach out to the media and the release is covered or it's picked up and the story's written, but your audience isn't ready for the message, it's lost. Or even like if you had a really great story and you pitch it to the media and they're not ready to hear it yet, they won't pick up the story. And that's why it's very important to have a PR firm, because we can keep that communication going. And then whenever that reporter is ready to hear that message, we're presenting it to them. So PR, it helps with B2B public relations and B2C public relations, because one, consumers are looking in the media. You want to have great media coverage about your business, about what new products, about where people can find you. You want that. And then also on that B2B play, if you're looking for investors, if you're looking for stakeholders in your company, you want to make sure that when they're Googling your business, they see, oh, they made this much in revenue, or they donated to this cause, or you want to see their businesses are active and they're doing something. You don't want to Google a business and it's just like their company page that pops up on Google. You want to see what they're doing, where they're at in the media. But public relations is a huge part of the marketing mix. That communication with the media is so important for businesses. And also I want to talk about like crisis communication. So we deal with a lot, like not a lot of crisis communication, but in the cannabis industry, we're in a very regulated and compliant industry where a lot of businesses might have issues with state officials or just compliance issues that they're having to deal with. You don't want your company to have 18 stories in the news about how there was a testing issue with your product, and
Yeah.
we want to you want to have a PR firm that's able to reach out to the media and say, yeah, like they understand that this happened here, we can provide a statement, or having that team to really back you up on the media side, because most of these companies don't have access like a PR firm would. So just really controlling that narrative, the consistency, and really making that connection with your brand with the reporters, because once reporters start learning about your brand and learning about all of the great things you do, they're way more in tune if a firm were to pitch a story about them, to pick it up because they've seen you in the media, they know what you're doing. So public relations is very, very, very important for a business.
Yeah, and I'll say we talk with a lot of journalists and PR folks as well through CMA, and one of the things we see is that for particularly smaller businesses who may be doing all their marketing and PR in-house, what's nice about working with the firm, or at least I should say how you should approach PR in general, is with that journalistic background in mind. So writing a press release is not the same as writing copy for your email, right? They're using standards that are set by that industry, and journalistic standards that are much more independent, much more neutral than it would if you're writing your own marketing piece. That's obviously going to, hype up your products and services however you want. So to be able to have that skill or that communication and write that press release as if you were a journalist, where it is sort of as independent or as neutral as possible, so that when they read it, those key messages do stick out and it doesn't sound like a commercial. And I think that's the big difference that PR firms or those who do have that journalism background understand, is that you can't communicate with journalists like they're sales folks in a dispensary, because they're not. They're a part of the media, and so they communicate very differently. It's a totally different style than writing ad copy or your own newsletter as a marketer.
Yeah, completely different. And you hit the nail on the head with that one. It's so important to, like, every press release, there is a formula to how to write a press release, but a lot of media too, like journalists are always on crunch time, always on deadline. They sometimes just use the release and place that as the article. So always making sure that everything in the press release is the who, what, when, where, why. The most important things are right at the top. A quote from someone or a representative of the company that you're putting the release out for. There's a formula for how to write a press release, and it's very important to make sure that that's always done in the best way possible, because 9 times out of 10, if they're not going to write the story, but they like your release, they'll use the whole release and they'll place that. So yeah. And also a boilerplate, having like your company boilerplate and your company bio is so important for businesses, and something that we see a lot of companies, they don't have like their executive bios. They don't have their company boilerplate, their website copy. So like we're able to use the key messaging and use it on all of these different channels, so that every time a consumer is going on your website, reading about you in the press, they see that same key messaging, and they're in tune with what you're doing.
Yeah, and I actually have a story to say about that. So when I was before I started CMA, I was the CMO of a company in cannabis, and I was we did all of our press in-house. And when we launched, I wrote a press release to our local media, which was we were in Boulder, Colorado, so the Boulder Daily Camera at the time. And that's exactly what happened. I wrote the press release as if I was the journalist. So I tried to write it very independently. And I had a quote from our CEO. I had a quote from one of our customers. So that sort of independent third party source. I wrote it very factually. I included stats, and the journalist literally copied and pasted it almost word for word, and it was the article. So when you think about it as if you're almost doing the journalist's job and put yourself in their shoes, it is going to be way easier to get that picked up and allow you to control that messaging more, but in a way where if they do need to ask questions or they do need to follow up or they do see a gap or a hole, they can, but you are saving them work because they get like hundreds of pitches in their inbox a day. And so they just don't have the time to, do the work for you. So you either got to do it yourself or work with experts that know how.
It also shows too how like PR firms in the cannabis industry really control a lot of the media. Like a lot of the media that you see in the press for cannabis businesses stemmed from a PR firm. So really understanding the role that public relations firms play in the media and how it could help your business is the very beginning of PR.
And there's so much interest in cannabis right now. I mean, it's an exciting industry. It's one of America's fastest growing industries. I think I just saw recently too, we're one of, if not the number one employer as far as job creations, new jobs being created. So there is a lot of attention on what we're doing, and the ability to effectively communicate with the media is so important for your company. But also one thing I like to talk about is, we're a marketing organization, so we get asked a lot about, where can I advertise? What channels can I use? Because I can't use Instagram, I can't use Facebook, I can't use Google Ads. Well, communicating with the media is protected under your First Amendment rights. You can say, in theory, whatever it is you want to the press, and they're allowed to publish it and discuss it, where that is not the case on these tech platforms or other places you might be publishing. That doesn't mean you should say whatever you want. You should still have a strategy, but just in the sense that is a right that we have, and our ability to communicate with the press is something that is protected and the public does see as credible. So that is a channel that everybody can use, regardless of whether they're a plant touching business, an ancillary business, B2B, B2C, or whatnot. So it is available to you regardless of the status of cannabis federally or in your state. So, all right, well, now that we've talked a little about PR, let's talk about some of the things you have learned in your career. So we've got a lot of cannabis marketers who listen to this podcast of all ages, all stages of their career. And one of the reasons I like this industry and why I actually started CMA, our listeners know, is because I was a cannabis CMO, and I tried to take my skill set from working in tech and apply it to cannabis, and just realized that marketing playbook, if you will, is not copy and paste. It's very different in this space. So it was a lot of trial by fire for me and so many, which is why we have this community. So what are some of the lessons that you've learned over your cannabis career, and what is some advice or perhaps something you wish you knew when you had first started?
Yes, that's a great question. I want to first off start by saying, all young marketers, please have confidence in what you're doing. That is something that I feel I didn't have in the very beginning of my career. I'm approaching,
which is normal.
I'm approaching the 1 year at my firm, and I joined a team that was very lucrative and super profound in their knowledge. So coming and being new, I was very overwhelmed. But as I started developing and gaining more confidence and networking and learning about the industry and learning and finding my position in the company, I was really able to develop not only my skills, but my brand, help our company. I just was a keynote speaker in Chicago at a networking event. So yeah, I traveled from Arizona all the way to Illinois and was able and talked about cannabis PR to over 100 professionals. And it was so amazing. A lot of people were just so interested in PR, and it made me really gain that confidence and understand that, we do know what we're talking about. We just need, those listening ears. And also something that I want to talk about too is having a really strong mentor in this stage in your career as a young marketer. I'm very blessed to be in the Arizona cannabis market. We have the Marijuana Industry Trade Association here, who we work really closely with at Proven Media, and they're one of the best networking events, I would say, in the country, definitely in Arizona. But really getting connected, understanding the ins and outs of the industry, finding your place, being as as authentically yourself as you can be. That's what I live every day. I can't be anybody who I'm not. So I live to be authentic, and I enjoy now that I get to do it with my career and help these cannabis brands be authentic and strive themselves. But yeah, just some advice would be to have confidence, move with purpose, and it'll be great. The industry is in its infancy, and as long as you have a good head on your shoulders and some determination, it'll be great.
I love that. Well, since you've talked about personal brand, I want to talk about some marketing strategies. So perhaps you've touched on this on the business side, but if there is anything else you would like to add, I do want to ask, what are some effective marketing strategies specifically that you see brands using? And then on the personal brand side too, what are some ways in which you can build your personal brand? And if you could just sort of talk about the difference between the two, as well as any overlap.
Yeah. So something that I noticed too when I first got in the industry was I was Sadie at Proven Media. And that wasn't a bad thing. I love our firm and everything we do, but I was like, I want to make sure that Sadie Thompson is known as well. So really pulling together making sure that when you're doing all this work for your clients, you're not missing out on your own. That's something that we realize in our firm is we do PR and marketing for all these other companies, and then our company is the one that doesn't receive the marketing and PR.
Totally get that. Yeah, it's real.
Yeah. So just really like saving time, working on your own brand, really being well connected. LinkedIn is the best platform right now, social wise, for cannabis companies to use. Making sure that your LinkedIn is cinched up, making sure that you're connected with the right people. When I got my job at Proven Media, my boss, Kim Prince, she said the first thing that she looked at was who I was connected with on LinkedIn. So, or, like she wants to know who I'm connected with, what you can bring. So making sure that you position yourself to be desirable for people to want to work with you. And also making sure that you're staying up to date with cannabis laws. A lot of young marketers, I feel like, could benefit from talking more about education. I feel like we grew up in a lot, cannabis was looked at a lot differently.
Yeah.
And so we're really that generation to come in and be the education source and to destigmatize cannabis, essentially, really break that barrier between cannabis and consumers. But young marketers, build your own brand, and by doing so, you will help your company.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I just want to echo your point about LinkedIn. It's so active for cannabis, and it's one of the few places that actually allows fairly uncensored conversation about it, certainly compared to Instagram and Facebook. And from the B2B side, we use it religiously at CMA, and it's been a really helpful platform and avenue for us. So I'm really glad that that's open and available. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about what you see as far as the future of cannabis. The future of cannabis marketing, the future of cannabis PR. I mean, now that you've been in this space about a year, the joke is that 1 year in cannabis is like dog years. It's like 7. It just goes so fast and things change so much. And you also mentioned that regulations and the laws, they do change really quickly, and they're different in each state, each city. Obviously, we don't have a federal framework yet, but that's eventually will happen at some point. But how do you see the future playing out, and how and why is that important for brands from a marketing and PR perspective?
Yes, I think that the cannabis industry is going toward national legalization. And so I think that right now it is super important for marketing and PR firms to start positioning their clients to be prepared for when global legalization happens. So just like, for example, in Arizona, we just had the 1 year anniversary of rec sales in the state. When rec launched, all of our clients were in the newspapers, like in all of the local media, really you want to be able to capitalize on those huge events that happen in the industry. So making sure that you're prepared and the businesses are strategically positioned to succeed and to thrive in the media, in their marketing campaigns, throughout their business, they're able to strive. And where I see it changing is, I think the industry will become more regulated by the government too, especially on the marketing side, just because, I mean, every single state is different. You could have a billboard you can't have a billboard within 300 feet of a school or a church in some states. You can't, there's too much of a gray area right now for the cannabis industry. So I do see within the next 5 to 10 years, a lot more regulations or a lot more parameters or boundaries for what we can do right now. It just, like I said, it's just super gray. And so I think within the next couple of years, we'll have some more defined laws and defined regulations that we're able to use. So just making sure that as a marketing professional, that you're very in tune with what your state is doing, with what's going on in DC, with what states are doing and where everything's going, to make sure that everything is set in stone for when legalization does happen.
Yeah, and I do want to mention, when it comes to the laws, it depends also on how open the culture is to cannabis and how that changes over time. So for example, Colorado didn't allow billboards when they first launched, and that has recently changed as, enough time has passed and things have played out and everything has been fine. But it is also on us as an industry to communicate with our legislators at all levels about what works and what doesn't, because they're learning too. They don't know how to market cannabis or, what's an appropriate or effective law. They're to some degree, sure, right? And they're using standards and best practices from other industries. A lot of our laws are actually based off of what the alcohol industry does. But as we know, cannabis isn't alcohol. So, there's some differences. And while that's a really great framework, it's not the end all be all picture. So it is an iterative process. And as new states come online, the laws, they start out one way and then they change and evolve as we see what they look like in practice. So just to echo your point, I want to emphasize to our audience, and particularly newer entrepreneurs and those in newer states, that if there is something that isn't working for you, to not be afraid to articulate that to the regulators or legislators in your state and let them know why this works or why this doesn't work, so that they can make better and more informed policy, because they actually do really rely on your feedback a lot more than you would think. We don't have to live with we do, but we have say in this process. It's a democratic process. So just the ability to recognize that and understand that and speak up, not just to each other within the industry, but have that communication with our regulators is just something I wanted to add.
Yeah, and I actually have something to add on that as well. So just talking about being ahead of it, of legislature and lobbying and everything. We actually were on the front end of kind of a breaking news story in Arizona about the Weights and Measures Department in Arizona, the Arizona Department of Agriculture.
And can you explain what that means for our audience who's not in Arizona? Who are they and what do they do?
Yes. So the Arizona Department of Agriculture, they are the regulators of cannabis packaging. They do all packaging, food packaging, but pretty much they're the regulators to. So when you purchase a bottle of lotion that says it's 6 ounces, that it is exactly 6 ounces when you purchase it. So they also regulate the cannabis industry. So something that was going on in Arizona was that the government the Arizona Department of Agriculture Weights and Measures Division was holding the dispensaries in contempt of consumer fraud because the product wasn't weighing exactly what was labeled on the package.
What year was this?
It was actually a couple months ago.
So it was the adult use, or all of them?
So all of it essentially. What happened was dispensaries, they can only do so much. They can only push out products so much. They can only do so much and not to mention cannabis it's not the same as like a thing of lotion. Cannabis is a tangible, it's a plant. It dries, it shrinks, it changes through its lifetime on the shelf. So we were just trying to push that it's very hard. It doesn't make sense that the government's cracking down on dispensaries when it's like a larger problem, and it's not the dispensaries problem, that the flower isn't exactly what it's weighed. It's a state and regulation issue. Whereas if it's off of, even if it's off 0.00001, it's an issue. It's not compliant. So just being ahead of that, and yeah, we were the firm that broke the story a couple months ago, and yeah, so it's just.
How did that play out? Is it still an issue, or did they get it resolved?
So it's still an issue, but right now the legislation and legislature, government officials are really working on how to regulate the industry, because I believe Arizona will be a groundwork for how a lot of other states roll out their rec. I mean, Arizona, we have a limited amount of licenses so that the market's not oversaturated like you see in Oklahoma. Yeah, it's very regulated. So I think Arizona is going to be a state that is replicable across the country. So yeah, just being ahead, understanding all the laws in your state, reaching out to those your government officials, the people that are making the decisions. They want to hear from you. Like you were saying, they want to know what these cannabis companies are struggling with, or what's making their jobs harder, and we all want a regulated and safe product for consumers. And how we do that is by working together and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And so it was just really cool to be a part of like in front of the Arizona Department of Agriculture Weights and Measures Division story earlier this year. But very cool.
Well, I hope it works out for you all down there. And that's so interesting. I actually never occurred to me about that being that much of a problem, or that detailed of a problem, because yeah, it has its weight, but yeah, it does change depending on, moisture exposure. But I always thought it would be such a negligible amount that it wouldn't like be a thing. I hadn't heard about that. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh yeah. I mean, like when consumers buy an eighth of cannabis and they go home and weigh it and it's about 3 grams, they just spent money that, yeah. Or, they were shorted a half a gram, or, but you don't know if it was packaged with 3.5 grams. So it's all just very, very gray, like pretty much everything is of the industry right now. So yeah, just being ahead of the curve, and making sure that you're telling your state officials what is going on in the industry and how you can help.
Yeah, definitely. And I should say, for our members who are listening, we do have a guide with links to all the regs in each state. So if you do need that resource, we do have something for you there. Okay, Sadie. So few last questions I want to ask. So just to keep it real on this podcast, like I said, it's a lot of trial by fire working in this space. And, part of why I founded CMA was I had tried my marketing playbook and failed so many times because it was just very different here, until I learned, okay, there's sort of a way to do this specific for cannabis. So do you have any stories of adversity you faced, or failure, or things that you sort of like learned the hard way getting into cannabis that you would want to share with the audience, just to bring some light to, how different things are, and what it's actually like working in here?
Yes. So the industry is so different, just from every industry I've worked in, just with how everything works, with the different people, everything. But something that I want to talk about, just as like a marketing and PR professional too, is how some things that you want everything to be perfect, everything in your brain. Like I envision this to look like this, to be like this. I secured a 3-page editorial feature for a client in High Times magazine. I was so excited for the placement. Of course, it was a huge placement, my first placement in a national magazine. I coordinated with the editor-in-chief of the publication, got all the photos, the interviews, everything went great. And then the one photo that I wanted placed in the feature was not in the magazine. It was like the one photo that wasn't selected. I was absolutely heartbroken, like called my boss crying. Like, I can't believe, like, I was just absolutely heartbroken. Like, that's all I wanted was for this one photo to be in this magazine feature. But my boss was like, just because that one photo didn't make it in the feature doesn't mean that the feature isn't like still as amazing as it should be, like that's something that we also have to understand as like a PR firm, is that we're pitching the idea and it's the reporter's story. Once that idea is gone or sent over to them. So not everything works out perfect, but to not be upset or to not like get too down on yourself if it's not perfect, because the overall message is still there, and it was still a great feature. But understanding the value of placements, and not everything like works out exactly how you want it to go. Or, I mean, shoot, you might have a typo that you'll never go your whole career without having a typo on something. Absolutely not. But when it happens, it's absolutely heartbreaking, and you want to cry and like hide in a hole. And if you can't get it fixed, that's even worse. But mistakes do happen. And especially in this industry, it's so cutthroat. I mean, marketing is the one part of business that businesses cut first when budgets are tough or slim. And so, yeah, we just always have to we have to work like under the knife basically at all times, because we know that our job is basically the first one to get cut if the business isn't succeeding. So just fighting through adversity, not being upset if everything doesn't work out perfectly, because you have to really understand the overall message. And if the client's happy, you should be happy too.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And leaving yourself some room to go with the flow and let things play out, because I mean, particularly in marketing and PR, things move so fast, and tight deadlines, turnarounds, that sometimes those details do happen. I mean, I've spelled association wrong before, and I've typed that word literally a million times. But sometimes it just happens. And so, yeah, it's just, how it goes. So thank you for sharing that story. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're almost at time. So is there anything else you want to mention or talk about that we didn't cover yet?
I think we covered everything, but I just want to talk about just making sure that young marketers are networking, are showing their face out there. With COVID and everything, I feel like a lot of people got very comfortable, like just staying behind their computer, and especially being marketing and PR, we are able to like really work behind our computer all day long, but what separates you or what makes you different is showing your face and really making that connection to your clients. And yeah, so just networking is important, and building your own brand.
Awesome. And Sadie, is there any contact information you want to share? Proven's website, if you have your LinkedIn, anything like that you would want the audience to know?
Yes, you can find Proven Media on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and it's Proven Media. Our website is provenmedia.com. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram, Sadie Thompson with 2 extra N's. Facebook, Sadie Thompson, and my LinkedIn is Sadie Thompson 1999, I think, but Sadie Thompson on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Sadie, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you, and I appreciate you sharing your stories today.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me on. I had a great conversation with you. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Party Like a Marketer. Follow us on Instagram at Party Like a Marketer, and on our website, thecannabismarketingassociation.com. And be sure to join us in person this June 7th through 9th for the annual Cannabis Marketing Summit happening in Denver, Colorado. Check out our website for more details and membership information. We'll see you next time.